Hey guys, Professor here, and today I'm going to get into what's required of the Guardian Druid to be raid ready. So we're going to go over um, a lot of things today, notably talents, stat priority, explanation of abilities, and then an explanation of role rotation, and then things that you can do to be considered a raid ready Guardian Druid and gear yourself and steel yourself for the coming Emerald Nightmare raid. Alright, so we're going to start off with talents. Here we are in front of an Emerald Dream Portal. I thought it was appropriate. So we're going to start off talking about your level 15 talents. You've got Brambles, which is a baseline across the board absorption of damage and reflect to your enemies. So every damaging attack that you take is reduced by a flat amount, increased by your attack power. And then it also gives you a nice little AoE damage buff to your bark skin. This talent is really weak, though. I don't like this. Because the other two talents in this tier generate rage for you, which if you don't talent for additional rage generation, then generating rage as a bear is pretty weak because you're relegated to only using Mangle and Thrash to generate a total of 10 rage between the two of them, plus Gore procs, so another 4. So again, 14, that fine, 14 rage between two attacks on long cooldowns. And then plus your auto attacks. Anyway, it's slow, so you need something. You need talents to help it, and that's why I like Bristling Fur, which is a 40-second cooldown, 8-second duration buff that gives you rage generated for damage taken. Pretty simple. You pop it on cooldown, and then it just generates extra rage for you for 8 seconds, which is awesome. Blood Frenzy also not bad, but not quite as good, as it requires you to consistently have many enemies nearby to maximize its potential. However, when you have many enemies nearby, the amount of rage you generate will be tremendous. I mean, it just scales up and up and up with the more enemies that are nearby. But again, I think it has situations where it's ridiculously good, but those are limited. And Bristling Fur is always at least just good, where Blood Frenzy on single target is awful. So I've taken Bristling Fur. Um, level 30 talents. We've got Guttural Roars, which is a great talent. Um, increases this radius stampeding roar by 200%. Radius incapacitating roar by 100%, which is, okay. And reducing the cooldown of your stampeding roar by 50%. So you can stampeding roar your entire raid every minute, which it stacks with one of your artifact traits as well, the one that gives you an extra 5% movement speed for each person hit, maxing out at 5 stacks. So this would guarantee that you get those 5 stacks every time, meaning that every time you use Stampeding Roar in a raid, everybody else moves 60% faster, and you move 85% faster, which is really cool. This is definitely a great talent, though I would say it's only really great in raid situations, um, which if your raid needs frequent movement speed buffs, you gotta take it. It's huge. Displacer Beast, cool talent, terrible for Guardian Druids though. We never want this. It's awesome, don't get me wrong. The 25-yard blink is super sweet. The 50% movement speed increase, great. But it shifts us into cat form, which sucks. So we never want to be in cat form when we're tanking. Because in bear form you have an extra 200% armor and an extra 55% stamina. Just at a glance here, for all intents and purposes, 3.2 mil health, 1.9, 3.2, 1.9, or 1.9. Here's cat form actually, so you could see exactly. Yeah, so you always want to be in bear form. No Displacer Beast. Wild Charge is what I've taken. It's quality of life, it's mobility. We're not the most mobile tanks in the game. We're not demon hunters. We're not warriors. We don't have leaps. Um, we don't have a charge unless we talent for it. Besides Skull Bash, but you typically want to save your Skull Bash for interrupts, and not for mobility. But that being said, if you take Wild Charge and you don't care about interrupts because you're a fool, you do have two charges, so we become one of the most mobile tanks. It's pretty sweet. And there are situations where you might want to use your Skull Bash just for the mobility, because it's not on a very long cooldown, and if you're just fighting ads that aren't going to cast interruptible spells anyway, hey, 2 charges. I like Wild Charge. In a raid situation, I may take Guttural Roars, especially for progression, to be able to give people a movement speed increase every minute, so that I know that they're not going to be standing in stupid things, or at least that they can move quickly out of them once a minute. That's pretty big for progression, but just doing heroics and mythics and whatever, I take Wild Charge, also just for, being out in the world. Wild Charge is quality of life increase. That's what I like. Then we've got our affinity talents at level 45. So I take balance affinity, huge quality of life change, increasing the range of all my abilities by 5 yards. So I can use my thrash and swipe from. Oh, hey, guild. All right, look at you. Anyway, I can use my thrash and swipe from 5 yards further away. So now my thrash and swipe have a 13-yard range, and my mangle has a 10-yard range. It's cool because I can move out of small ground effects on a lot of boss fights that have crap I have to move out of where the boss is casting it, and I have to move away from him. Most notably on in Eye of Ashara, there are 2 bosses: the giant boss and the Wrath of Ashara. Massive deluge type thing where I have to move out of it. But I can still do my whole DPS rotation from 10 yards away, so it's pretty cool. Feral Affinity increases movement speed by 15%. Yeah, it's not of much real consequence, but it's a quality of life increase, improvement, change, whatever. If you want it, take it. I can't knock you for it. I just happen to like this one better. And then Resto Affinity, which used to be my go-to, healing you for 3% of your max health every 5 seconds. But when you're in bear form, that's halved. So you will literally take a smaller HP heal in Night Elf form than I do in bear form. So I don't like it. What is nice about it, though, is on progression, if I'm off tanking, if I'm not tanking something, in Resto form, I can hop out of bear and throw heals at my raid. I cannot do that otherwise. The only heal we have otherwise really is Healing Touch. We don't have any hots anymore. Nope. Balance Affinity is not really helpful for that. I don't really do much more DPS in my Moonkin Affinity stance. But take what you like in that tier. On our next tier, we've got Mighty Bash, Mass Entanglement, Typhoon. So Stun, AoE Root, Typhoon. I take Typhoon because it kind of gives us an extra interrupt on any kind of in heroics and mythics anyhow, or on trash anyhow. Anything that's not immune to knockback, if your Skull Bash is on cooldown or your in-cap roar is on cooldown, and you need to stop an ad from healing or whatever, you can Typhoon, knock them back, and they're no longer casting. So I like it for that. It's a little disorienting for the DPS, but screw them. Level 75 talent. Soul of the Forest, Incarnation, Galactic Guardian. All 3 of these are going to help with your damage done and rage generated. Soul of the Forest is just kind of like, I pick it and I don't have to think about it. My Mangles will always generate 11 rage now and deal 15% more damage. This is the weakest talent, but if you're not the kind of person who likes to have more things to think about, then go for it. It is the weakest one, but it's not unusable. So that's I'll leave that for you. Incarnation, 3-minute cooldown, 30-second buff that reduces the cooldown on all my melee abilities and my taunt to 1.5 seconds, and then it makes your mangle cleave to 3 targets. So it's a DPS increase because I can mangle thrash, mangle thrash, mangle thrash, mangle thrash, and that's also going to generate me a lot of rage for 30 seconds. So it's a nice buff, a little bit of a survivability buff because you can generate a crap ton of rage within those 30 seconds, so more Iron Furs, right? That's awesome. Galactic Guardian, though, gives you more smooth rage generation throughout the entire fight. It gives you a 10% chance whenever I deal damage to any target to trigger a free Moonfire on that target, free automatic Moonfire on that target. And then when that occurs, my next Moonfire that I cast generates 15 Rage, which is the most Rage you can generate from a single ability. Galactic Guardian's great. 10% chance is pretty good, especially multi-target. It's actually, I mean, I've come to call it Disco Bear. Um, when I'm AoEing, there are just Moonfires that I have no control of, firing off all over the place. It's pretty cool, and I generate a crap load of rage from it. And it gives me an extra ability to generate rage from. So now I'm generating rage from 4 abilities. So it's good. With those 4 abilities, I can basically have 100% uptime on Ironfur, which is awesome. Next here we've got Earth Warden, which is another one of those pick it and forget it talents, but it's definitely not the strongest one here. Guardian of Elune, which lets you do a little bit of micromanaging using your Mangle. Your Mangle will increase the duration of your next active mitigation by 2 seconds, or the healing of your next frenzied regen by 20%, which is cool. And the micromanaging that I mostly mean, uh, I'm in a situation where I need a heal. Well, I better Mangle first because I'll get 20% extra frenzied regen. So maybe not micromanaging, but it's a buff. Survival of the Fittest reduces the cooldown of my Bark Skin and Survival Instincts by a third. If you're on a fight, I take Guardian of Elune as a blanket, but there are definitely some fights where maybe I need more Bark Skins and more Survival Instincts. So this could be a talent worth taking sometimes. Think about it. I like this one. Your last tier, I'm just going to get Lunar Beam out of the way right now. Lunar Beam is a 1.5 minute cooldown. It's cool, definitely. Big heal, big damage over 8 seconds. But you have to stand in one place for 8 seconds, which is not always entirely possible, so I've gone and tossed that out. Now I take Rend and Tear, which gives you a 2% damage reduction, gives a 2% damage reduction to all targets applied with your Thrash. 2% per application of Thrash. So maximum of 6%, unless of course you have that legendary item that gives you let your Thrash stack up to 5, and then 10%. And then also on those targets you deal that percentage more damage. Pretty sweet. And then you've got Pulverize, which does, you're right, it does, provide an 8% reduction baseline. So by default, 2 more than Rend and Tear. Oh my god, 2% more. But it consumes 2 stacks of your Thrash, which in my mind makes it kind of clunky, and it does cost you some DPS because of that, because now I have to stack 2 more stacks of Thrash every time I Pulverize. It takes me about 10 seconds to get 2 more stacks of Thrash, and then I need to keep a Pulverize buff up, which only lasts for 20 seconds. So half of that time I'm restacking my Thrash, and then 10 seconds later I'm just gonna remove them and have to do it all over again. So to me, the 2%'s not really worth it. I take Rend and Tear. So that was a long one. Talents was a long one. But this next one's pretty simple, because we're going to get into stat priority. Come on. Stat priority is pretty simple for us. So 4 main stats, right? We've got versatility, mastery, haste, crit. Oddly enough, that was in order. So I'll break it down, though. Versatility increases your damage and healing done by a percentage per point, and decreases your damage taken by half of that percentage per point. So this is essentially what every talent does. It's just less clever. But it's good. For a tank, obviously, it's good. It decreases our damage taken. We clearly want that. And then it increases our healing done, which makes our frenzied regen better. So versatility, good stat. Versatility is our best stat. It was mastery. We saw a little bit of a nerf to that because our scaling was kind of out of control, which is understandable. We had too much health because of that. But mastery then is our next best stat, and now mind you, mastery is not far off from versatility. So never be bummed out if you get something that has mastery but no versatility. It's almost just as good, but like a little worse, like a small percentage worse. Mastery increases our maximum health and healing received by a percentage per point, and then increases your attack power by double that percentage per point. So this is really great because our mastery is why I have so much health. Our mastery is like why bears have way more health than every other tank right now. It's great. And then it increases your healing received, um, which is really cool too. Mastery and versatility, our mastery and versatility are really almost the same, because our mastery increases our healing received, our versatility increases our healing done. Mastery increases your maximum health, and then versatility decreases your damage taken, which are roughly equivalent to one another. Like if it were the same point value, point for point, it's the same thing. Decreasing your tanking is equated in effective health, so decreasing your damage taken. If I reduce the damage of an attack by 1 point, then I've essentially increased my health pool by 1 point. It's sort of theory and mathy, but it's real, I promise. Um, Haste then is our third best or second worst stat. Um, it increases our attack speed, which increases our rage generated, not by a lot. So it is significant. Versatility and mastery are very close to one another for Guardian Druids. Haste is significantly below that, but it still does something beneficial. Crit, since we no longer have Leader of the Pack, and we no longer gain extra rage for crits, crit is useless. um, it doesn't do anything for us. It increases our DPS a little bit. That's it. It's our worst stat. And then obviously you can't get dodge anymore, so dodge is what it is. But yeah, okay, again, stat priority. Versatility, mastery, haste, crit. There it is. That is the stat priority for Guardian Druids. Um, let's keep going. So we've talked about talents. We've talked about stats. Let's talk about abilities. Barkskin is the first ability in your... Oh, stuck. We're stuck on mushrooms. Barkskin is the first ability in your spellbook. Your skin becomes tough as bark, reducing all damage taken by 20% and preventing damage from delaying your spell casts. You will not be casting any spells in bear form. Disregard that bit. But it's a 20% damage reduction cooldown, so that's cool. And it's on a pretty short cooldown, what is essentially a 1.5 minute cooldown. So, it's important. It's a good ability. I will, use it when you need to take a little less damage. 20% is not huge, but it'll keep you alive in certain situations. Then we've got bear form. That's your bear form. Bristling fur, which is one of the talents that we talked about taking. You're going to use this on cooldown because it generates rage based on damage taken for 8 seconds on a 40-second cooldown, and you want to maximize your rage generated as a bear because rage equals iron fur equals frenzied regen or mark of our soul if you need it. Cat form, we talked about how we shouldn't be in cat form. Don't be in cat form while you're tanking. Dash, this activates your cat form. We don't want to be in cat form. That being said, though, it's a 70% movement speed increase, and if you need to move faster and you're not going to be taking hits from a boss, then it's perfectly fine to use, but you need to get right back in bear form once you're out of whatever you need to be out of. Don't use this. Frenzied Regen has been completely reworked. It's a really cool heal now. It will heal you for 50% of all damage taken in the last 5 seconds over 3 seconds, at a minimum of 5% of your maximum health, which is really cool. You're going to use Frenzied Regen directly following any big attack that you've taken, and you will, over 3 seconds, recuperate half of that damage that you've taken. That's awesome. Or you could use Bolt Charges and recuperate all of that damage taken over 3 seconds, which is awesome. Growl, that's our taunt. If you've decided to play Guardian Druid and you've decided to tank, you should know what taunt does. Healing Touch is the only heal we really have. You can't cast it in bear form, though, so don't use it. Incapacitating Roar. Incapacitates all enemies within 15 yards unless you've taken God or Roars for 3 seconds. Damage taken will cancel the effect. So I only use this ever on trash to interrupt spellcasts. So, if you come up with a better use of it, though, definitely let me know. Iron Fur is the first of our active mitigation abilities, increasing armor by 100% for 8 seconds. Very, very cool ability. Essentially, armor reduces your physical damage taken. So Iron Fur reduces my physical damage taken. Pretty big. So you want to use this, keep as great an uptime of this as possible, which if you've taken the 2 rage generating talents that I talked to you about earlier at length, you will be able to keep roughly 100% uptime of Iron Fur, provided you're not in a fight that deals excessive magical damage where you need to be using a lot of Mark Reversal. You're next. Nope. Mangle. Mangle the target, deals 20% additional damage against bleeding targets. That being said, you always need to have Thrash stacks up. You always will have Thrash stacks up because you're going to be thrashing all the time because it's one of your stronger abilities, and if we've talented for it, it makes your enemies deal less damage to you. So Mangle will always be dealing that 20% additional damage. Anyway, it generates 6 rage, and that's why it's important. Maul costs rage, and it just does some damage. Not even very much damage. Mangle deals far more damage. So, you know, I don't maul very much. It's basically there to keep us from, like, overcapping on rage. But I guess it's there in a situation where you don't yet want to use 2 Iron Furs, but you need to not cap. It helps us do a little extra DPS, so, you know, I guess. Moonfire is essentially an extra dot for us, so I do apply it at the beginning of a fight, and, you know, throughout the fight if I need to. But typically, since I've taken Galactic Guardian, typically if I apply it at the beginning of a fight, I'll usually never have to cast it again, unless, of course, the Galactic Guardian, you know, procs, which 10% of the time it will, and then I get a bunch of rage. So Moonfire is great, only really if you've taken Galactic Guardian, though. Otherwise, if you haven't, then it's just an extra dot that you can use. We're going to gloss over this. Rage of the Sleeper is your artifact ability. Unleashes the Rage of Ursoc for 10 seconds, preventing 25% of all damage you take and reflecting a bunch of damage back at your attackers. That value will be different for you. May be different for you. Yeah, this is huge. It's a 25% damage reduction, so 5% better than Barkskin on the same cooldown as Barkskin. And then if we've gotten Rage of the Sleeper, or Embrace of the Nightmare, it will also make us deal 25% more damage and give us 25% leech. Pretty cool stuff. Rebirth is your battle res, so you can res someone in combat. Remove Corruption, removes curse and poison effects, but it takes you out of bear form, so don't. Rebirth. Notable. It doesn't take you out of bear form. So that's awesome. It's truly awesome. Does cost 10 rage though, so like, are they worth 10 rage? I don't always know. Skull Bash is a charge as well as an interrupt. More importantly, it's an interrupt. I should have said interrupt first. It was a little confusing. But it is a charge as well. And since I've taken Balance Affinity, 18 yards, pretty great. Glossing over. Stampeding Roar. Increases the movement speed of friendly party members within 15 yards, unless you're taking Guttural Roars, by 60% for 8 seconds. And then, with one of our artifact traits, we gain an additional, personally, 5% movement speed per friendly target that we've helped at, capping out at 25% of a buff. Survival Instincts is our huge one. Reduces all damage we take by 60%. Whoa! For 6 seconds, at a maximum of 2 charges. This is like Warrior Shield Wall. Warrior Shield Wall, I believe, lasts for 12 seconds, 10 or 12 seconds. But they only have 1 charge of it. We have 2 charges, so basically equals the same thing. These charges will... Yeah, you can't stack them. So, you know, don't try. But, pretty big. So anytime you're about to take fat damage, Survival Instincts, and you will take 60% less fat damage. Swipe, it's merely an AoE. Swipe, will hit enemies behind you. which I was not 100% sure of until literally right then. Thrash also will hit enemies behind you. It is a true AoE. It is not a cone. It follows the really cool animations that we have. Travel form, not while you're tanking. Typhoon, we talked about. It's a knockback. You can use it on trash for interrupts. Wild Charge is a charge. Fun thing, though, about Wild Charge actually in raids is if, and it's only really happened to me once, if you're out of bear form with Wild Charge, you could use it to fly to an ally's position. I've used that once or twice to prevent myself from getting killed by knockups. So, you know, think about it. Wild Charge. Gore makes it so that using Thrash Swipe or Moonfire has a 15% chance to reduce or reset the cooldown on Mangle and cause it to generate an additional 4 rage. You can get an artifact trait that will give you an additional 5% on top of that 15, totaling at a 20% chance to reset the cooldown on Mangle. It's great because that generates more rage, and we need more rage. And then there's our Mastery, and then Thick Hide, which just merely reduces all damage taken by 10%. Here we are in Stormwind, and we're going to get into the rotation for Guardian Druids. Now, just brief intro to it. The underlying motive of every single thing that you're going to do as a Guardian Druid is you are trying to maximize your rage generated. You want to do as much DPS as possible, right, because that helps get bosses down. But your main job as a tank is to mitigate damage. You need to take as little damage as you can possibly take so that your healers have to expend as little mana as they have to keep you alive, to keep the rest of your raid alive. So that's what you're doing here. So more rage generated means higher stacks of Iron Fur, which is less damage taken, or more consistent Mark of Ursal, which is less magical damage taken. And that's what we're doing here. We want to generate as much rage as we can, so we can take as little damage as possible. So, then we can kind of get into it. Now, I'm not going to be taking damage from this guy, but Bristling Fur will be used on cooldown, and that'll be giving us additional rage. So imagine I have more rage. So we're getting into combat. We have our Moonfire out, stack of Thrash going. We want to keep Mangle and Thrash on cooldown, because those are generating rage for us. We're using Swipe as a filler, Moonfire when it comes up. Oh, look at that. Now we have multiple procs. We're going to use the Mangle proc first, so it generates more rage, because we want to keep it on cooldown. This is it, ladies and gentlemen. Iron Fur. That's it. There's no rotation so much as there's a priority of things we need to do. Mangle needs to be on cooldown. Thrash needs to be on cooldown. Because Thrash stacks up and directly equates to less damage taken, up to 6%. So we need 3 stacks of Thrash up as quick as we possibly can get it up. Then Mangle needs to be on cooldown at all times, because if it's on cooldown, then it will sooner come off cooldown and I can get more rage faster. Plain and simple. The Moonfire procs we want to use as quickly as we can. We want to use procs as a higher priority than anything else. So if these two are off cooldown, but my Moonfire has procced, I'm going to use the Moonfire first, because the procs will not overlap. They're not going to wait. So if I have a proc right now and then it procs again, I lost it, you know? And I don't want to lose it, because if I lose a Moonfire proc, if I lose a Galactic Guardian proc, I lost 15 rage. I don't want to lose 15 rage. That doesn't make me happy. So use your procs as fast as they come up. You want to keep 100%. If you're on a boss that deals largely physical damage, you need to keep 100% uptime on Iron Fur. It's entirely possible with the talent choices that I've given you. I always have Iron Fur on. There's literally never a time that in a fight that I don't have Iron Fur on, unless there's no physical damage coming out, and then guess what? I've got Mark of Ursal on. You need to have an active, as a Bear Druid, you need to have an active mitigation up at all times. It's unacceptable if you don't. That's the biggest thing that we do, so do it. Then the next thing really to talk about is filler. Swipe is your main filler. because it can reset the cooldown of your mangle. If you need to refresh, if for some reason Galactic Guardian hasn't procced, you need to refresh your Moonfire, then do that as another filler, because again, that can reset the cooldown on your mangle. But so mangle if it's up, thrash if it's up, Moonfire if there's a proc, swipe if none of the above. And then again, always use Bristling Fur. Bristling Fur can be cast while you're stunned, and it also is not on global cooldown. I like to make sure of things before I tell you guys things. Anyway, use that on cooldown. This also is not on GCD, so interrupt important things whenever. And then you've just got your big cooldowns. Barkskin. If there's a decent-sized attack coming at you that you would like to curb 20% off the top of, you just curve that damage right away. Barkskin. Reduces it by, 20%. Also, most of the time that I get stunned or whatever, somehow CC'd on a boss fight, I'm usually casting Barkskin. Because if you get stunned, you can't avoid any attacks, so it sort of offsets that. So I don't take, like, crazy damage while I'm stunned. Though that is more crucial for other tanks, because we don't block. But anyhow. Rage of the Sleeper, I actually always use at the beginning of a fight. Or I'll slightly delay it to link up with a Lust to maximize my DPS and Leech. But it's also, though, it is a slick 25% damage reduction. So sometimes you might not want to use it like that. Sometimes you might want to use it, save it for a big attack, which is perfectly fine too. Because it is first and foremost, we are tanks, and it is a damage reducing cooldown. So, treat it as such. You can treat it as such. Survival Instinct, 60% damage reduction right off the top. If there's a big attack coming in, Survival Instincts. If there's something that you think, oh shit, that might kill me immediately, Survival Instincts. If there's a ton of ads, boom, Survival Instincts. It is awesome. 60% is more than half of a reduction. It's tremendous. It's the best one. You can't beat it. Yeah, that's the rotation, though. It's really not complicated. Oh, Maul. If you need to do extra DPS, Maul. If you're about to overcap on Rage, then you have to Maul to prevent the overcapping. But that's rare, because most of the time you can just use Iron Fur and have it. Because Iron Fur won't... it will overlap. You're not ever going to waste it. You could have... Actually, I don't know what the maximum number of stacks is, because I haven't ever had more than... I had 4 once. Man, that was a time. Anyway, brief explanation, actually, that's important, of the Iron Fur stacks. Let me just get up to max range so I can display this. Okay, so we have 1. No, wait for that to tick down. Now we have 2, but when that first one wears off, boom, we're back to 1. They do not refresh one another. They merely overlap. That is important to note. Lastly, to kind of close out this guide, some things you can do to get raid ready. I mean, as of right now, getting raid ready, you need to do heroics. A lot of heroics. And go for the satchels, because you want some fat gold. You need to work on getting your item level up, above 840 at least. You need to finish your class haul so you can get that 3rd relic slot, because that's huge. That jumps your artifact weapon way up. When I unlocked the 3rd relic slot, it bumped up my item level by like 5 points. It's pretty tremendous. So these are things you need to be doing. Running heroics, running mythics. Do all your world quests, because the world quests a lot of times actually they can reward gear, and that gear can upgrade. This 850 helmet that I have with a bunch of mastery on it, I got from a world quest, and it was supposed to be an 830 rare, and it Titan forged to an 850. All gear can be upgraded from anywhere now, so run your mythics ASAP. Get that, so they're locked out. If you don't get all the gear you need for mythics, then farm heroics, because heroic gear, while it is innately 825, can upgrade to 850. This ring that I have is heroic Titan forged, 850 ring from a heroic dungeon. So that's it. I mean, like, it's kind of the same as any other expansion. You got to do dungeons to get gear, but now what's different is you can get really great gear from just doing heroic dungeons, if you have a little bit of luck. And if you do it enough, I mean, you're gonna get it at some point. So that's it. These are Guardian Druids now. They're awesome. They're in a really good spot. Really smooth incoming damage. Not really the best tank DPS, but they have some of the best survivability. Definitely the highest health pools. I think they're super fun. If you have any questions, if there's anything that I haven't covered in the guide that you think maybe I should have covered, go ahead, ask me in comments. I am more than happy to address anything that I may have missed. Thank you guys for watching. I really hope this was helpful to you. And if it wasn't, I'm sorry I'm so useless. Later, guys. I'm a big fan of holes. Big hole guy. Like me some holes. Interestingly, not a big fan of